We're live. We are back. What's up?
Man, not a lot. Really kind of getting back into the mojo of things after Summer Strong. Real quick overview. I thought it was a really good event. I mean, very unique, and I have thought about it, and I've considered it, and I've talked to other people about it. I was actually actively talking to as many people as I could about it in the event of what do you feel, what do you like right now, what's it feel like compared to the rest. And I think the fact that it was very mild. It was in the 70s both days, and
Yeah.
that place is like the center of Earth. It's
Yeah, it
like
was like
just
touching
a
triple digits last time I
molten
was.
lava.
Yeah.
Yeah, 90 degrees at 9 o'clock at night is not fun with 100% humidity. So I think there was something to that. I did not hear a bit about politics or current news. I mean, it really did seem like a very intentional and serious group of strength coaches, more so than I've seen in the past. And I don't want to detract from any of the previous years because they've all had certain elements of greatness. But this one just felt like it was a very attentive group. Um, there were less speakers this year, and I think that gave people some room to breathe.
Yeah.
They were a little bit more casual and like, okay, there's only seven speakers. I want to see five of them,
Yep.
rather than there's
Yep.
15 speakers or there are 12 speakers or whatever, and you're kind of tied to a chair all day. And I think that opened the door to a lot of offshoot communication. A lot of coaches sitting around brainstorming. I know Greg and the Wolf Brigade crew was inundated with coaches all day long, both
Yeah.
days, especially after Greg's presentation. I mean, unfortunately, on that front, someone like that could have done demonstrative instruction wasn't given 3 hours, but Greg has an entire weekend and
Right.
just touches the tip of the iceberg. So
Yep.
it was, man, I don't, in the lineage of things, I've been to 10 of them now. I don't know where this one ranks just yet because I think I'm a kind of person that likes a little distance from things
Hmm.
before I put them in perspective. But I really enjoyed it. I had a little bit more of I did the deadlift MC, but I was able to just kind of disengage from a lot of the stuff because one, as a credit to the team and the organization that Sornex has put into the event. I mean, I know that from inside, leading up to it, like most things that are a flagship event, it seems like the house is on fire. But when you see the actualization of it, Josh, Ricky, Bert, um, and the crew that they've assembled just really they knocked it out of the park. And I know that
Yeah.
there were some things. There's always things
Yep.
that you can check as like we can do better or these were problems. But I don't think the average person would point back that man there was a lot of problems or there was this or that. Like I think to the attendees it was a flawless event, and as a company I don't really think you can shoot for more. So people were excited about strength. People were lifting and pushing each other. The deadlift, my portion of it. I mean, dude, as somebody who often somewhat tries to forget parts of my life, I've done a really good job about pushing myself away from powerlifting. Um, as not trying to immerse myself in it, but also with that, I've just kind of forgotten the relevance that I had in the sport sometimes. So when you go to a place like Summer Strong, there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of lifters. Some of the feedback that I got from lifters or you know, the recognition that man they were excited that I was on a microphone while they got to lift is not lost on me. When I was lifting, I think it certainly was. I took it for granted.
Mm.
Like I thought, man, I'm the shit. I'm still going to be here 10 years from now. I was like, but now where it's those are a little fewer and far between, I have a better and much deeper appreciation for them. So my take on it was a great event. It was a place where people could forget the noise of the world for a few days, and it just seemed like everybody had a good time. I hope so.
I was going to ask you this too, because even after, because I didn't go last year, so it was 2 years ago when I was down there for Summer Strong last. When you do the MC stuff for the deadlift, you mentioned that like you kind of distance yourself from or have distanced yourself from the powerlifting realm of things.
Hmm.
But in that setting, when like
Hmm.
everybody's just fired up and like actual big lifts are happening and stuff, not that it makes you feel like you want to go lift, but is there any part where like just in your body, you kind of remember that feeling of like, oh, this is bringing me back 10 years or what, however far, just to like from a feeling standpoint, not that like you want to go rip a bar off the ground, but you
You
just kind of
know,
remember what that's like.
I'll tell you this. I'll give you a parallel. I'll answer the question and then give you a parallel. The immediate answer would be no. And I've dealt with this in stages. And the stage I'm in right now is pure appreciation of being a spectator of it. Like,
Yeah.
not, oh, I would have done this, or I could have done that, or I could do more than this. It truly is like, man, I know how freaking hard this is.
Mm.
And I admire that strength when it's present, and not in the fact of like being in the room, but like in this person's life right now. If they pick up something really, really heavy, I know what it took to do that, and I know what it means to them.
Yeah.
So from an outside appreciation, I have that. There were definitely a few times where I looked at like a 600-pound barbell when they were moving up, and I was like, man, can I pull that right now? And like the dumb idiot me that has videos.
Do you think you could?
600 would be probably right at the cap end of what
Yeah.
I would think, what I would estimate myself capable of. I've done 550 for 4. I mean, it was 540 ish something for 4, pretty smoothly. It was a set of 3 that just felt good enough for a 4th. Might have had a 5th. So would I confidently say 600-pound deadlift? No. Have I intentionally detrained myself to that end? Yes. Like I don't really care about that so much. But yeah, man, there's something visceral there when I see it, especially as we get heavier. Even in, heavier is a relative term. Like watching the females lift in the 300s is always going to be impressive to me on a deadlift. Watching the guys get up in the 600-700 range is always going to be impressive. And I think I did have the big dick mentality when I was lifting, that if you weren't lifting more than me, it was irrelevant. And that's a competitive mindset. That is a self-preservation mindset of staying focused. And but now I see how strong all these people are. Like, what the fuck? It's their journey wherever they are. If they're telling me this is a PR, they're the best they've ever been in front of me.
Yep.
So it's a different perspective on it. But I will tell you this: I haven't felt something like this in a long time, and I would just call it like a performance anticipation or whatever. But I got to training outside, and I was doing some circus kind of lifts. I was doing some one-arm snatch, some mace stuff, and not to reference the mace as a circus lift, but just saying like I was doing some of the strongman implements.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this really fat, like 115 kettlebell, and it was like absurdly round. So that made the snatch of the object a little bit weird, because if it got outside, the momentum would pull you out. So I basically Kimura myself 3 or 4 times getting this thing around, knocked the shit out of myself because it came out, and I like drug it back in, and it swung in and smacked me in the back of the head, and ended up, that was fine. But I did get it. I just kind of progressively worked my way up. But before, I'd missed it a couple times just with the oddness of it. The 95 or whatever it was went smoothly. 115 seemed like a relatively normal, sane jump. And I'd done that. God, I did a 165 or 170 at my strongest, like no problem. And I thought, this 115 is going to be kind of cake. So I underestimated it, mishandled it, went back for it, and just mishandled it again. So then like that, I don't know if it's like the ego, if it's like the pride in me, or just the desire to do something that is really hard, that kicked in, and I felt that juice again, that feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't really get that in jiu-jitsu because it's a slow game.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you can get amped up, but it's like, you better not get too amped, because
you got to be able to
you're
focus
gonna
and
burn out.
Yeah.
But like that immediate drag racer, when you say go, it's go time, kind of thing, was cool for me to feel. Cause like in my gym, I don't generally train that way. I don't generally try to push the envelope of like, this is something I can literally maybe only do once, and did it expose a weakness in me? I don't know. I don't know how much I need to keep snatching one-arm snatches to feel strong, because overall I feel strong. The people I wrestle with tell me I feel strong.
Yeah.
I think what I'm doing is working, but it's always like when you get proof that, man, years ago, this would have been like something I could have done 5 or 6 times in a row,
Hmm.
regardless that I was 100 pounds heavier and juiced out of my mind. It's still, I think there's still a part of that admission of, man, I'm not as strong as I was,
Hmm.
but relative strength, I feel great.
That's awesome.
So,
It kind of leads into one of the things that I had texted you about yesterday that I've been thinking on, as far like some training like ideas or just thoughts
sponsor,
that I've had.
sponsor.
uh, um, I've been thinking of a lot of the guys that were like the old boxers, and
Hmm.
even Tyson, right?
Hmm.
And or like the martial artists, or like the stories about guys like Herschel Walker, who obviously like all of them had some component of probably what we would consider a strength and conditioning program, right?
Hmm.
And this all I'll tell you, like the genesis of this thought came from having some conversations with some of the guys that I'm coaching and talking about like, do do we really need any sort of novelty in any kind of training aspect, right? Like we, like as far as training phases and needing different lifts to express different things. Like I understand and I agree with the benefit of all those things. I'm saying this on the
Hmm.
front end, but
Sure.
like when you hear stories about how Herschel Walker would do like 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 pull-ups, and 1,000 sit-ups like a day or whatever that
Hmm.
ungodly number was, like he obviously would have still been Herschel Walker if he hadn't have done them to that number. But
Right.
or guys like Tyson would wake up and run 6 miles every morning, and then he would just do body weight exercises, and then he would just train his boxing. Like there's these just things that everybody does every day, and that's
Hmm.
like what their training is, and that's how you train your body. It's like I have this many things of this. I'm going to just do that every single day. It's not like a sets and reps broken down training program. So I'm thinking about this. How do I make this practical in my example? And it's like if I was telling myself, look, what are like the handful of movements that'll make sure I'm hitting everything, but it's like I just give myself a number of reps. And it's like
Hmm.
you do this number of reps of these 5 or 6 things every day. Doesn't matter what they are. Like if I'm going to do it every single day, I'm going to be pretty strong enough and in pretty good shape for the most part. So
Yeah.
I was thinking about it like in uh, it's putting together a couple of these movements. Like you could do some sort of press, like obviously a push up, and not all of them even have to be body weight. But like if we're doing like a push up or even Hindu push ups, like Terrence used to do, that
Hmm.
open up a little bit more range of motion in the chest and everything. We do like a walking lunge. You do like you could do some kettlebell swings, and then like some
Hmm.
kind of carries. Like you could put together like 4 to 6 things. And it's just like I'm just gonna do 5 to 10 minutes of however many reps I want to do at all of those things. And I won't really need to do anything else. Anything else I do is just like like bonus work kind of things. Like if I wanted to go one week or one day and be like, let's see how heavy I can lift, like how heavy of a sandbag I can lift for 3 or 4
Hmm.
reps, or if I want to pull some weight off the floor or something like that. But I was thinking like before all of the structured sets and reps and stuff, like guys were still super fit with
Hmm.
very basic knowledge or little knowledge of any of this. It's just like I just have to do this every single day. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter if you're tired of it. These are the things that work.
Yeah.
Right. So does that make sense of like how because I'm trying to talk this out and how I was putting this web of thoughts together in my head as I'm talking to you about it.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people get too consumed with, I need to be on this. I'm in this block. I'm testing this specific thing for 4 weeks. And then I need to make sure I change this lift over to get, bump this percentage up. And I'm like, if we're talking about how are we going to make this sustainable, especially for people at the beginning, I could literally tell them like, look, you have 100 reps of 5 exercises. You're going to do them every single day.
Yeah.
And that's literally it. Like, I don't want you to have to think about anything because it's
Yeah.
about establishing the movement habit. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'll say this with all respect to Louis and the West Side Barbell Method. I trained there,
Mm-hmm.
um, and have had a circular relationship with that gym, and Louis and I ended on good terms, and it's a fantastic system. You can't fault the system at all. But here's the truth: the system is written in a static form in all of his books and on his publications. that is valuable, like meat and potatoes information that if you use from now until forever, it will make you better. The workouts that we did inside the gym were always experimental, always exploratory. We were always trying to push the edge, which a lot of times in the gym meant failure. But
Yeah.
to Louis, it also meant feedback,
Right.
and it also meant like adjustments and tweaking. So our system was never a solidified, like it was around concepts, it was
Yep.
around ideas. But I think the hyper specific structure of our nature in training was, if there was any mathematics to it, it was haphazard and bullshit at most. Like what we did was 8 sets of 2 on Fridays, and inevitably, you were supposed to be at a certain band or bar weight. Doesn't matter. Like in that setting, you cannot let yourself believe, even if science, even if Louis, even if the guys before you are doing exactly what Louis's book said,
Yeah.
there's always guys pushing 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds heavier than the book.
Yep.
Whether it's for ego, whether it's for Louis believes that this week they just need to do that. So a living, breathing training cycle like that is much, much different than what is statically put down on paper. So I would like
Right.
people to just understand that. Coming out of hunting season, I think we talked about this a little bit. I train Greg's program pretty religiously. I always take some liberty to it just because of like my injuries and things that, I don't avoid things that I don't enjoy, but I do avoid things that leave me sore in a way that isn't like muscular.
Yep.
So there's very few of those things, but I do make adjustments. And sometimes I just don't feel like doing Greg's workout and I do something for myself. But coming back, I will tell you this. When I started training jiu-jitsu back in January, I was very burned out on hunting. I was very burned out on Greg's training. And not from the sense of it was trying to marry those two together.
Right.
And Greg's training is very, very, to me, I take it very personal because Greg is my friend and I will not fail at something that he has invested in me for. So that was my problem, is I couldn't give it all that I had. So I needed something different right now. And that's where I was burned out, was holding that line of Greg's standard. So I started doing exactly what you're talking about. I started thinking about my workout as in 5-minute rounds of jujitsu. Like, when I'm on a rower and I'm doing 5 minutes on my circuit there on the rower, I usually tend to imagine how a jiu-jitsu match goes for me. And as stupid as that sounds, it makes that 5 minutes more meaningful and intentional. So I start out slow, and then it's like 20 or 30 seconds as hard as I can go. And then it's nice, slow, hard pulls, but slow movement, things like that. I just create a match in my mind. Sandbag carries. I've got to keep this sandbag on me for 20 minutes, just like a heavy ass opponent that I don't want on me. Can't put it down, but I can put it in this hand. I can put it this hand. I can put it on this shoulder. I can zercher it. I can, whatever I can do with it, just can't put it down. So for me, I think that there's probably some sense of that. As primitive as their education on strength and conditioning might have been, they can look at, that's how people put those dumbbells in their hands when they're punching. They understand this is what I'm doing. I don't know why I think this is going to make me a better puncher, which some people say it won't because it throws your timing off. But the idea of being able to be stronger in those exact same planes would lead me to think that most of these early, I'll say primitive strength and conditioning programs, but like early on, were more revolved around, okay, what muscles are functioning. That's probably less important to that era. I think you had the Eugen Sandows and that type that were like, how does this muscle function and how can I build it?
Yeah.
Then you get into the sport specific stuff where it's like, how can I make something in the gym mimic what you're going to be doing in your sport?
Yeah.
And I think we probably started building the house from the roof down in that sense, instead of, okay, let's get all of our athletes across a basis of strength and then sport specify. And really, to me, sport specificity is more of athlete specificity because, the lifting doesn't understand that you're training a javelin thrower on one hand and you're training a baseball player on the other. The coach understands that, but also, what if your javelin thrower is extremely, extremely strong but lacks fast twitch fiber? How would you train that athlete versus just a basis of training him exactly like somebody else who is in an explosive sport? you're going to train them to the athlete's needs if you want the best athlete. Coaching in a college setting or a high school setting where you have a team, you're going to have to generalize. You're going to have
Yeah.
to build some kind of accommodation there. But I also know a guy right now, Corey Chapman. I don't want to overstep because he's very, very detailed, but he has those dog aspects of his program where it's just hard shit
Yeah.
that builds toughness, that builds grit, that builds character, but it's also a repetitive building block to the field,
Yep.
you know. And I think that's what if you can marry the idea that strength should have a base across whether it's squat, bench, deadlift, clean and jerk, snatch, a CrossFit type curriculum, whatever your base of strength measure is, it's going to be exposed. So you better choose the right ones. And I think that those are going to be more in the building blocks of powerlifting, weightlifting, and then strongman
Yeah.
implementation. You know, it's just one of those things. It's like there's a marriage of those things that can be really, really beneficial to the individual athlete or the team. And I think the old boxers, it goes back to your thing the other day about the 200-point victory. And actually, I talked about this as coaches. What obligation do we have to these kids to not over specialize them as athletes, not just in a
Mm-hmm.
training room, but as athletes in a mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Because those guys in the left that lost 200-0 to today's hyper athletes probably had career development skills
Yeah.
that were there when the sport was no longer. The problem with these kids today is that they're sold on a program, and I know I'm getting a little bit off topic in the weeds here, but I think that they're sold on the idea that they are going to be a pro athlete, so go all in.
Right.
So to me, this comes back to is this a solve for that issue? If we can implement some of these harder, more not necessarily weight specific stuff, but like the stuff that you're talking about,
Yeah.
just a basis of discipline that's very, very hard in a physical sense. Would that have any social impact to them in the workforce? I don't know.
And I think,
That's a dumb finish
yeah,
to that statement,
no,
but
no,
like
it's
all
not.
of that
Mhm.
kind of tied in there.
It did, because I'm thinking is all of this came about from the point of establishing habit and discipline
Hmm.
in guys that are relatively new, right? Because
Yep.
it's like, well, especially if you're brand new, depending on where you're coming into whatever training program, if it's your first one, if it's, you never really been around much, you don't need to know a lot of the details on stuff at the beginning. Like, it
Right.
helps to understand why you're doing some things versus others from just now I have a little bit of knowledge, but that's what a coach is for, is to understand the weeds and the details on stuff. And unless you're just
Hmm.
genuinely interested, like, a lot of people don't need a lot of the information about why something is put together the way that it is. They just need to know why it's going to work. And for a lot of guys, they can see if we give them like several basic movements, and it's like, just do these every single day. Get a
Yep.
sweat, do reps, do it in rounds, chunk them together however you want. You could do it in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 supersets and split them up. It's like these basic 5 movements are like all you need.
Yeah.
And once you establish this, we can build off of them in the variations that exist of those movements, or add in an implement that expresses that strength or that capacity in a different way, right?
Hmm.
But for a huge amount of people, and a huge amount of men specifically, who are just trying to establish the habit and the discipline of training every day, because that's the other thing. I think we've tried to optimize so much that, like, we forget that I don't know that, like, rest days necessarily need to exist how a lot of people treat them, where it's like, oh, I trained hard yesterday, I can't do anything today because I don't want to mess up
Yeah.
tomorrow's lift. You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
they're trying to optimize this so much. And unless you're competing in a thing at a high level, or at any level where the competition is a part of it, like, I get it in that sense, because you're
Right.
trying to dial in for a specific moment, right?
Well.
But for people that are just like trying to train and be strong, there's no reason that you can't be doing something every day. And if all you've got to
Mhm.
do is these 5 movements or whatever it is, like, just go out and spend 30 minutes doing them. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. Like, and this is how you begin the process of this. I just have something to do. well, I don't know what to do. Well, look, I gave you 5 movements. I don't care how many reps you do of them. Just go do them for 30 straight minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I think you strip it down. You really do strip it down to a valuable point. Like the best progress I made as far as physical conditioning, um, I was working with Terrence. Now that's, I was very, very strict with my stuff with him.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the workouts, I would start that Sound and Fury album. It's 41 minutes.
Yep.
And if you remember back, in my story, it was like 41 minutes of Don't Talk to Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would put that on and I would conduct all of my training inside 41 minutes. And even if I went off protocol and didn't do what Terrence had sent that day, that album was my training marker.
Yep.
In 41 minutes of like, I'm going to go in here. I'm not just going to do the reps and sets. I'm going to go through here and do these motherfuckers as hard as I can, or as, like if I'm doing tempo stuff, as patiently as I can. Really make this 41 minutes, because you're in there. If it's 41 minutes, you are the only deciding factor
Yep.
of what you get from that workout. I know people that can get nothing from 41 minutes. I wanted to literally collapse. And that's why I love those videos when I was walking around and the sweat was just absolutely dripping off of me.
Mm-hmm.
My floor looked like I'd been rolling jujitsu, but it was 41 minutes of kettlebells, maces, and push-ups,
Yep.
pull-ups.
Yep.
So I think that people do overcomplicate the process quite a bit. Like, go pick up something that's really, really hard to do for a minute and then do that 30 times.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
you're going to get better. And I do think that you need to reach a point where you're feeling the fear of, I can't do this anymore. I
Yep.
can't do this anymore. I can't do this. And every time that you say that, and again, I'm circling back to jujitsu because that's what I think about.
Mm-hmm.
There are times like when you're learning to accept a choke, or you're learning to just angle through an armbar. It's like, it's going to break, it's going to break, it's going to break. And then you got to just keep going. And you learn that I'm not nearly in as much danger as I thought I was.
Yep.
Or getting in an ice bath. It's not nearly as cold as it feels the first time.
Yep.
Once you start building those adaptations, and that's what I think people just need to realize. Workout density. How much work can you do in a set amount of time?
Mm-hmm.
That is the most valuable. And I would tell you, the people that are the true greats they can pack a shit ton of work
Very
into
efficient.
the same time that you can. That's money, that's sport, that's
Yep.
whatever it is. The most efficient are usually the most successful.
And the thing that it does really well when you put a time on it. And so I'm going to take this in two different directions. One, it forces you to, especially if you're going to tell yourself, I'm doing this much work in this amount of time.
Mhm.
Like, because I could say I'm going to work out in 41 minutes and not do much, but I was technically working out for 41 minutes, right? Like,
Yeah.
so if you're giving yourself, like, I have a lot of work I need to get done, it forces you to crank up the intensity, which a lot of people don't do as often as they should, because it's uncomfortable. Like, it's not
Right.
that fun, right? And say what you will about the rest of the methodology, that's one of the things that I think CrossFit did brilliantly was
Mhm.
like, look, we have 12 minutes and you're going to do as many rounds of this as you can in 12 minutes. You have 15 minutes, you have a 20-minute, and it's like you're working constantly and it's hard work. And most people have never worked that hard on purpose, like
Right.
that consistently, and so there's a lot of benefit to this time, or this rounded, rounded meaning like different rounds of stuff,
Mhm.
because it forces you to crank up your intensity and effort in that, because look, I have to get this done. I'm not going to go 1 second over the amount of time that I've allotted for myself, and I have this amount of work to do regardless. So
Mhm.
it's like I can kind of coast through it, and maybe I hit it, or it's like, or I just do it and I focus on the technique of it, and I go hard, like you're saying, and put effort into it. And I just, and that was kind of, like I said, the genesis of a lot of this, because I think about like these, like the Tyson guys, where they would just do ungodly numbers of stuff. And it's like, I don't even know that type of training was like, it was almost like, this is the amount of stuff I have to do to at least stay where I am fitness wise. Like,
Mhm.
it was almost this, I just have to do this so I can remain here. But my other effort is going to be learning how to be the best boxer of all time. Like, I'm
Yeah.
spending it on the skill of the sport. But it's like, I have this chunk of thing that is required of me in order to even maintain where I am right now, which is still freakish, right? And you build that up over time. So you think about raising the floor essentially with these types of protocols where it's like maybe it's only 50 reps of everything is all I can do right now or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But it's like do that for a couple months and you might be at 200 reps of everything and like your
Yep.
floor has raised and you can put more effort into those things at that point.
Well, that was something that I focused on in the second book that we published with Juggernaut, the
Mhm.
365 Strong, was the idea that I am not necessarily married to the idea that I need. Now, this is a little bit backwards.
Mhm.
As a powerlifter, I had to detach myself from the idea that the only PRs that mattered were the top ones.
Mm.
Because when I was at Westside in my younger days, that was the only stuff I measured. It didn't matter
Yep.
if everything else was progressing. If I didn't get stronger there, it didn't matter. That's true. That's still a true statement if you are a competitive powerlifter. But I started to do what you're talking about right there. I started trying to focus on the breadth of my strength. Okay. If I stay in this very thin line, I get stronger. What one exercise can I add to my 4-week cycle and milk something from to see a positive change? Okay, that's great. What exercise can I take away this next cycle to see a positive gain? So I was
Mhm.
always playing these kind of games like that. But I also think that it's very, very important to understand. Yes, if you can do this every single day, the limit, like let's say you can run 10 minutes every single day and that's all you ever do, and your time is just I'm going to run 10 minutes and that's going to be 1 mile. That lends itself to a certain efficiency for a 2 mile run or a three
Mhm.
mile run or a 4 mile run. But let's say that you perpetually try to improve the distance that you can go in that 10 minutes,
Mhm.
or the pace that you can sustain beyond 10 minutes, on
Mhm.
and on and on. There's so many ways to keep marking that improvement. But a person who is always, always progressing by just fractional improvement is going to be the person that long passes the person who just stays to the idea of, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to do this many sets of this many reps in this amount of time. That is not that is beautiful on paper, but how you do those reps, how you manage your time, those things start becoming more important as you become a seasoned trainer. In the
Mhm.
beginning, if all you can do, if you have no other basis, go in, go through the reps and sets, take your time, do what you need to do. But every workout should be more challenging. The weight should be heavier. The reps should be cleaner, on and on and on forever. There's a million ways to skin a cat.
I'm gonna pause real quick. I have
Okay.
a little thing popping up on my monitor here. I'm just gonna